Hi, this is Charles Bursell. Welcome to Conversations. You may know me from About an Hour with Dunzo and Bursell. This is not that. You may know me from Stream of Consciousness Talk Radio Theater. This is not that. Although both of those podcasts are wonderful, and please check them out. This is just a simple one-on-one conversation. I'll be doing these from time to time, no particular calendar or schedule. My conversation in this podcast is with Andres Garuz. He's a friend of mine. He's a good guy. He's an actor and a director, and I think he has a day job too, the day job thing. Anyway, good conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Andres came into my studio, seeing it for the first time, and he fit right in. He really felt comfortable. He liked it. He was full of compliments.
I may be superfluous in my compliments, but I really dig, even this tablecloth.
Oh, thanks.
With hieroglyphics on it. That's so cool.
Yeah, this was a great Goodwill find.
Oh, no way.
Couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe I found it. And I've used it for a couple different things. I've just had it on the wall. Mm-hmm. I draped it over my couch for a while. It was the upholstery for my couch.
Nice.
Yeah, this is a great Goodwill find. I've used it on my couch. I've used it as a wall hanging. Right now I'm using it as a tablecloth. It's cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's super cool. See, it's just such a contrast from the homes that I typically go to and work. I'm out in Waukesha, Pewaukee, Brookfield area. A lot of large houses with stereotypical conservative, patriotic markings all over the walls.
I try so hard. Not to be judgmental.
Yeah.
But, oh, my God, I am. I'm so judgmental.
Yeah, it's really difficult.
When I see the way other people live, It reminds me when I was a kid and I delivered the Janesville Gazette.
Okay.
That was back in the old days when every Friday afternoon or Saturday, depend, you'd knock on the door and you'd collect your money for the week.
Sure.
That's the way it used to work. And that was the first time I kind of glimpsed in, they'd open the door and I'd peek in and see how other people live.
It's weird.
And I remember being kind of shocked.
Yeah. It's very weird.
And that feeling has never gone away. Because now, as an adult, it's natural when you're a kid. Mm-hmm. You only know one thing. Mm-hmm. And so something that's different, it seems strange.
Right.
But that feeling never went away. Now, when I go into when I find myself in someone else's house and I see how they live and I just kind of see the stuff and the...
It's a totally, yes, we've heard, don't judge a book by its cover. But it's such a larger cover to judge a person by once you enter their home. Because, you see a person, you see the way they dress, you see the way that they behave in public or the way that they talk. And yeah, that'll give you the best notion. The way that they talk and the way that they behave will give you the best notion as to what kind of person that is. But it's a totally different thing to visually see what kind of person that is by seeing what they surround themselves with, what they live in. It's weird.
Sure. The old thing, the first thing you look at is their books.
Okay.
I bet you do that, or do you?
I guess I haven't really.
Yeah, a lot of people do that. I certainly do. Not anymore because nobody displays their books anymore.
That's true.
I don't want to use this expression too often, but in the old days,
yeah,
you go to somebody's house, the first thing you look at is their bookshelf because you're just curious about that. Speaking for myself anyway, and their record collection.
Now that's something that I'm gonna. There's definitely homes where I can tell that the person's a little bit more progressive or liberal leaning, and then I notice the artwork. Uh-huh. I notice the music. I have noticed books, but typically in the basement, next to the furnace where I'm working. But now that's something I'm really going to keep my eye out for.
Okay, yeah.
Because just seeing the subjects that they have will tell you clearly what they're interested in some cases what they believe.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be a direct line. You don't have to see, Karl Marx Das Kapital up on the shelf.
That's very true.
You don't. It's not that obvious, though.
Right.
That's on my shelf right there. You can find it pretty easily. But the point is, it doesn't have to be that direct a connection. You can just you can get a sense. You can get a feel.
Right.
I think I've told this story before, but when I moved from California back to Wisconsin about 5 years ago, and I got laid off, and I was looking for work and coming back to live in Wisconsin. So I was I had some kind of free time. So I first went to Nashville to see an old friend I hadn't seen in a long time, and she put me up for a couple of weeks. And then after that, this was all kind of on the journey back. I had my sister who lived en route. I stayed with her a couple of weeks.
Nice.
And it was kind of nice just to sort of, unwind and see some people. The point of the story, though, is what we're talking about. I saw how they lived. Mm-hmm. And not just coming over for an occasion, but how they actually live every day.
Right.
And these are two people I love very much. So I'm not judging them, and I'm really not. But they lived so differently than I did. Mm-hmm. It was that paperboy moment again. Mm-hmm. My eyes just were wide open in awe of how they lived.
But I think it's good to be able to see that.
Sure it is.
And I think more people should be forced to see that. I mean, obviously not with brute force, but
let's force them.
But it opens your eyes.
Right. And I think you've touched on something really important. Yeah, force is certainly the wrong word, but people really should be encouraged to get out of their comfort zones, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Boy, even a better term is bubble. We live in, our bubbles are thick. We have thick skins. We can't break out of our bubbles, can we?
No, it's unbelievable. So I direct theater at my old high school, which I won't name the name of it because of the commentary I'm going to make.
Okay. I was going to say that's all right, but that's all right. Okay.
It's a great school. Don't get me wrong. I would be a completely different, probably, in my opinion, someone that I would not like had I not had the experience I had at this high school. Mm-hmm. That being said, it's a very conservative Christian high school. It's a big bubble for a lot of kids. And I just think back at when I was there, how different a lot of my mentality and thought processing was then compared to now. And so being back there now as a director, it's extremely rewarding for me because the arts, my exposure to the arts there and my participation in them is what shaped me into what I am now. Yeah. And to be able to give back to that high school in that same channel, I suppose, is extremely rewarding. But it's just so funny to see all these kids and their interactions and their mentality inside that same bubble that I was in. So I can see it, and every time that, because I like to encourage the kids to talk about controversial things. I like our rehearsals to be not just, here's what we're doing today in regards to this play, but also, let's talk. Let's talk about the world. Let's try to mature a little bit and have conversation. And
you relate it to the piece you're working on?
Exactly. Yeah. Always in relation. In the
context
yes,
of the, right,
absolutely. Right. But it's just so funny because time and time again, I just say, guys, just wait till you get out of here. Just wait till you get out, and you're going to see how different the real world actually is.
You're corrupting the youth.
I really am. I am, because there's a lot of administration that does not like me.
They're going to make you drink hemlock. So when did you start to feel the change in yourself? Was it while you were still there, or not until after you left?
I would say...
And I'll tell you the reason I ask, because you mentioned two things. One, the whole obvious notion you're talking about of the bubble and then being outside the bubble. But you also said how the arts, and theater in particular, and I totally relate to this because I had the same experience. Art, theater, and music got me going, and it got me thinking, and it got me feeling in ways that I didn't as a young boy in my very small conservative town.
Right.
So that's why I'm curious to know, did you start to break out of that while you were still there?
I would say that my thought process was heavily influenced, and influence isn't the right word, heavily changed, I guess. All right. Or at least the beak started coming through the egg.
All right. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because of both my experience in theater and choir, because we had a super awesome choir director who I'm actually still close friends with now. And she was very left-wing, And just being able to talk to these people that I looked up to that were very knowledgeable, who had a completely different opinion on things that we were kind of being spoon-fed isn't the right word, but it's not quite force-fed, somewhere in between the two.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was very refreshing. No, so I would definitely say that towards the tail end of my high school experience that the arts heavily changed the way that I looked at the world. And then I went to school for 1 semester in Chicago at, again, a Christian university. But just the fact that it was Chicago
yeah,
and still being a part of the arts, totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Yeah.
And so I ended up leaving there because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I told you earlier I moved to Panama for a couple months, and that was, again, even more off the spectrum outside of the bubble.
Sure.
Because not only was it, different in
in every conceivable way.
Yeah, every conceivable way. The
Yeah.
food, the language, the socioeconomic classes, and it was...
Yeah. Well, our stories have such parallels going here because, again, small town, very conservative, art, music, and theater, great teachers, and just just being in it and of itself sort of moves you and changes you. And so that was the beginning for me. And so I was beginning to get a sense while I was still in it. When I look back now and try to be objective about it, as even a junior, senior in high school, I was still generally pretty middle of the road, like politically. I certainly wasn't anywhere interesting. I was just kind of there where I was supposed to be, maybe a little more liberal than others.
Sure.
But I was starting to get those first wings, and then I moved. You went to Chicago. I went to San Francisco. I love this line. I tell people whenever I get the chance. It's about a week before I moved to San Francisco, and my mother said, without any hint of irony or humor, she said, "Well, what do you want me to tell people?" I said, "What? What do you mean? What do you want me to tell people?" "Well, I can't tell people you live in San Francisco."
That's unreal.
Is that the greatest line ever?
That's pretty awesome.
So then now I'm in San Francisco and I'm going to college, and for a while, and then I got a job as a singer on a cruise ship, and now I'm sailing to the South Seas and to China and just everywhere. We're in Cambodia, and anytime we had a day off on the ship, I never went with the tourist stuff. I just went out and explored.
Oh yeah.
A little education, a little travel. You and I aren't the smartest people in the world. We don't have all the answers to to everything.
No,
but
not by a long shot.
But we can both recommend you gotta get out of your bubble. If you can, just by hook or by crook, try to I probably wouldn't have been able to afford the travel, but I was lucky I got a job.
Yeah. But the thing is, and Dennis and I have found this.
Dennis is
my fiance, which we'll just say wife from now on because I really hate saying fiance. It sounds so pretentious.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're just going to say wife?
Yeah, we'll say wife.
All right. She's your wife.
Yes.
All right.
And it's Deniz. That's right. It's a Turkish name for those.
Is it a soft S?
It's a Z, actually.
It's a Deniz.
Yes, a D-E-N-I-Z.
Okay. All right.
All right. She's often said how in social settings she wants to just tell people that her name is Brittany because she hates having to explain.
I have to apologize. When I met her, and actually you and I have met several times.
Yeah.
And I know your wife.
Right.
But never really met her officially.
Right.
So not to go in that whole story.
Yeah, no.
But I don't know. You were standing right there. Maybe you heard the conversation. Maybe you didn't.
I did. I always notice because
I just felt terrible. I felt terrible. She had to say her name like 4 times because I thought I was hearing her incorrectly.
And I have to give her credit.
I thought she was saying Dennis.
I have to give her credit. And I thought about this because with my job, I always present myself as Andy. And my whole life I've done that, really, unless I know that somebody can pronounce my name correctly or is Hispanic or speaks Spanish. And I have to give her credit because she didn't really have a cop-out. Every time she met somebody, had to explain what her name was and how to
Yeah.
pronounce it, and I just totally copped out in most of my life by saying, just call me Andy.
Yeah. How do you spell it? D-E-N-I?
Deniz.
Deniz. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's Turkish.
It's Turkish. That's
Yeah.
right. So, I'm trying to remember where I was going.
Oh,
with
I'm
this
sorry.
story.
I interrupted
No,
you
no,
there.
no. I often go on down rabbit
okay.
trails.
That's okay. That's kind of the design of this show.
Yeah.
So should we try to find that vein again, or should we just go on?
Yeah, let's just go on.
right.
It's off there now into the cloud.
All right. Well, talking about the name thing, you and I have talked about this before. You're Andres.
Yes.
And I'm pronouncing that correctly.
It's close enough.
It's not quite there, but I'm doing my
Right.
best.
No, it's
Yeah.
it's very good.
Yeah. But it's not Andres.
No.
You don't want that at all.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate Andres. I hate Andres. I get Andre.
Yeah.
For a while in high school, I had a wrestling coach who called me Dre. That was unacceptable.
Oh, even in high school, you didn't think that was cool?
No. So it is Andres.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And you and like you said, with it depends on who you're interacting with.
Right. Yeah. And we kind of talked about this too in relation to the NPR person.
Oh, the classic iconic reporter who overpronounces
Yes.
international words.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I try to be careful not to come off as that guy, but we were just having this conversation earlier. I have, in the last second half of my life that I have today, I discovered pride in my heritage and my name, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so I want to,
Yeah.
I want to hear it pronounced correctly.
Yeah, and we should talk about that. But before we leave this, I want to kind of explore it a little bit because I've thought about this a lot. Now, there's no way to acceptably Americanize Andres.
Not really.
You just kind of have to say it.
right.
That kind of comical, and I've seen like Saturday Night Live and others make fun of it when a reporter especially kind of overpronounces words. There's a very funny scene in the old sitcom Community, which I was a fan of, where the main character Jeff, I think his name was. Do you remember Community? Did you ever see that?
I never watched it. No.
Anyway, it's about a group of friends who go to school together at this community college, and one of them is running for student body president, and the other one thinks politics is a joke, so he runs for president against her just to make a point. And in his speech, he does one of these horrible kind of classic, I was just talking to Andres, who told me he got a job at the cafeteria. And it was very funny. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is you don't have to step out of your accent, your
Right.
natural accent,
Right.
for me.
Right.
Like, for example, say a Brit is reporting on Charles Bursell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he would say, it's Charles Bursell.
Right.
Charles.
Right.
I don't expect him to be speaking in his British accent and suddenly say Charles.
Charles Bursell.
He doesn't have
That's
to
very
break out of
true.
his accent to say Charles.
That's very true.
He can say Charles.
Right. Right.
That's
right.
fine with me. So there are some things that you can just stay in your accent
You
and it's
can
perfectly
segue.
acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is what reporters, the kind of funny ones we're talking about, this is what they don't do.
They don't
They
understand.
feel like they have to step out of their accent.
Right.
It's not necessary.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally get that.
I just had to make that point.
No,
It was on my mind.
I've definitely noticed that before.
Again, there are some words that kind of aren't translatable.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you the perfect example, Gyro.
Euro.
Right. You can't say gyro. That's
No.
just saying it wrong.
It is.
That's not saying with an accent. That's saying it incorrectly.
Exactly.
It's gyro, or even if you want to put a little in it, it's
Yes.
gyro.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's funny you say that, though, because in Panama, just speaking about mispronouncing words,
All right.
in Panama, there's a town called Arraijan, and it's spelled Arraijan. The origin of the name of this town is that when the Americans controlled the Canal Zone and other English speakers were going out into the country and needed to stop in this town for whatever reason, there was no name for it, so they would say, you get to this point, and then it's at the right-hand side, right? And Spanish speakers, Panamanians, picked up on this because they never had a name for this place. and all they would hear is the white people saying "at the right hand." And so now the name of it is the Panamanian Spanish mispronunciation of the English term "at the right hand." So now that town is Arraijan.
Oh, how great is that? Don't you just love language?
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. But I love language, and it fascinates me so much to know those kinds of connections and to find out the roots and the origins of words like that. I'm kind of a nerd for that.
Nice.
So, but that's a funny kind of
yeah.
connection between the two subjects.
I want to go back to what you were starting to talk about, and now I forgot what it was. It's something about your travels.
That, and I remembered it before.
Okay.
So when I mentioned
let's go back to that.
We were talking about how difficult it is, potentially, to travel.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Well, Dennis and I have found out that it's really not that expensive and not that difficult to travel if you really have the desire to do it. We've been together for almost 5 years now, and every year that we've been together, we've managed to go on some relatively large travel experience at least once a year. And as long as there's two ways to do it. Number one, the way that we do it, you plan ahead with enough time, right? So when we're going on one adventure, because they're not necessarily vacations, we like to adventure, not like you said, you don't like to go to the tourist traps.
Yeah.
We like to go out and experience stuff. So when we go on one adventure, by the time we get back, we're already planning the next one and looking for flights and looking for the best time of the year to go, price-wise. And we also travel predominantly where we know somebody. So that's one
smart.
of two things.
Yeah.
A, we get a local feel for the region, but more importantly, so that we have a free place to
crash.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's the other way to travel, which is, not have any kind of responsibilities, family, whether it be family, job, and just be able to live really minimalistically and being able to work odd jobs until you can pay to get yourself to the next place, which I envy and admire.
That sounds like beyond my ability to embrace adventure. I don't know if I could do that.
Takes a special kind of person.
Yeah. Have you done that?
I've not done that, but Tom, tall blonde guy that usually comes with my team at trivia, he's like that.
Yeah. Andres and I know each other through trivia.
That's right. AJ O'Brady's.
Yeah.
He did 2 years ago, he did a 2.5 month long motorcycle cross country road trip. He and another buddy of ours, the other guy, went back home about halfway through, and Tom just camped on the side of the road and stayed in hostels and stayed with people that he met.
Yeah.
And he eats rice and beans contentedly every day of his life. And
see, I could do the minimalist part of that. I would be very comfortable with that. What I couldn't do, and I'm not saying I'll never be able to do this because you're never too old. You can change.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very shy. I'm very introverted.
Sure.
And that whole idea of traveling and meeting strangers sounds so wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine myself doing it. That would take a big leap for me.
Right.
It's just not in my nature.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing to overcome. If you're not that type of person, that can be a really difficult hurdle to overcome. I'd like to think that I've been blessed with the quality of being able to talk to strangers pretty easily.
That's good.
It's definitely fun because, and one of the cool things also that I've noticed in my travels, one of my favorite parts of traveling is the people that you meet. And there's this weird, for whatever reason, when you're on the road, there's this inhibition. That's not the right word. There is typically in everyday life this wall between us and strangers.
Yeah.
Like when we live in our bubble, when we live in our comfort zone, when we're going to back and forth between work every day, you're really hard pressed, unless you're a really extroverted person, to just strike up meaningful conversation with strangers. But for whatever reason, when you're on the road, there's this vulnerability that you're already experiencing because you're not at your home. You're not in your routine. You kind of rely on the goodwill of strangers in some situations. And so those walls come down. And some of the most interesting people I've met have been through travel. And it's not necessarily because they're these really cool people, but it's because we've been able to have really down-to-earth, really meaningful conversations. And it happens in somewhere between 20 minutes to an hour, and then I never see that person again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's something that's really like special that I'll never forget those people. And when I remember like the conversation I have, it's such a fond memory I have of that person, almost like you knew them really well, right?
Yeah.
And I've had nothing but one experience with them. And that's a really cool experience. Yeah.
You know, on the occasions when I have had a short exchange with somebody just on the subway, or just we're both putting gas in our tanks,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, somebody drives by really fast, and you say, man, what's he doing? The other guy says, hey, he's crazy. And, you know, whatever. You just have this little exchange. I got to tell you, there's this, like, I don't know if it's some kind of endorphin rush or some kind of chemical rush in my body, because, like, it feels so great to talk to a stranger just for a couple seconds, just to exchange a little something. It really feels good.
It does.
I've experienced that.
It's so rewarding. And you're right. There is like a endorphin sort of release, because it's something you don't do every day. And one of the things that I've talked to Dennis about, and Bob and Tom, is I really am trying to make a habit of keeping that willingness to open myself up and have that conversation with strangers a part of me once I get back home and through the door.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there's that vulnerability for whatever reason when you're traveling, but once you get back home, it's very easy to get back into the, okay, well, yeah, I go to Woodman's and I get my groceries and I just swipe the card. You don't really have any kind of meaningful conversation with the cashier there or anybody in the aisles. And if you just take the opportunity,
and they're there, the opportunities are just all around you every day,
everywhere, and you can have just as meaningful an experience and a conversation with somebody right in your backyard. It doesn't have to be, you know, halfway across the globe.
See, this is such a great reminder for me. This is good. This is really good. Yeah.
It's a good feeling. It really is.
See the negative side of this that I want to bring out in the open, only so I can kind of purge it, is that the typical experience of the introvert is that, and it's true. It's not just a cliche. We hate small talk.
Mm-hmm.
We hate it.
Yes.
And that's the way most conversations kind of start. Well, is it hot enough for you, or whatever? And then some they're telling you about their kids' school play or something, and it's just, I don't know these people. I don't care. and so, like I said, this is the negative side. I'm in the confessional now.
Sure.
And so pretty quickly I will turn off.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and all that's filling my head is escape. How do I escape this?
Mm-hmm.
So I gotta try to turn that around.
But you're right, that does happen. And so these meaningful conversations that I have on the road, I often feel happen more with fellow travelers, because there's that, breakdown of the wall.
Okay.
So yeah, I think you're more prone to get trapped into those really meaningless small talk conversations with people back home that are stuck in their routine and they don't really have anything interesting to say other than
now how do we translate this idea of having great conversations? How do we bring that into our regular life? How do I get past
the small talk,
that escape, thing I talked about?
I think the first thing is probably, and something I need to work on immensely, is listening to people consciously. Yeah, somebody might be talking about their kid's school play that you have no interest in, but did they mention the play? Do you know the play? Is there something deeper to it that you can maybe make a comment on to immediately draw them out of that small talk routine? Because how many times have they probably said that same couple lines to strangers? I do it all the time. I do it all the time with my job because I kind of have to. Some customers I have a handful of lines of conversation with, and it's probably the same one for all the customers throughout the day, but it's the customers where there's both There's active listening going on both sides. Those are the ones that develop into more serious conversations, deeper, more meaningful conversations. So I think it's a combination between listening and trying to find that common ground where you can turn it into something more meaningful, which is hard. And, it's definitely a step out of the comfort zone.
Each one of these conversations is like a mini relationship.
It is.
Each one has to be giving. Each one has to be receiving. And some relationships work and some don't. Mm-hmm. I've certainly been in conversations where I'm the guilty party, that I'm not listening. Mm-hmm. I'm bored by you. You're talking about, you reduced your car payment by 10% by refinancing? That's just fascinating.
Condescending Willy Wonka.
Yeah. So I've been the guilty party. Mm-hmm. I'm judging you. I don't like this. I think this is all ridiculous. So just let me go.
Yeah.
I've been on the receiving end of people who aren't listening to me. We're having a conversation. There's a little back and forth, give and take, and what's new in your life. And I mentioned something I'm really excited about, and I can tell they're just waiting for me to stop talking. Mm-hmm. And there's no follow up. They just, as soon as there's a break, in they come with whatever their agenda is.
That sucks, and it happens.
And that's just a bad relationship.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah,
I've never thought about it like that.
There's a term that I simultaneously love and hate. Is there a word for that? I'm sure the Germans have a word for that.
There's probably
they have a word for everything. And that is a national conversation, or conversation in the sense of mass. Yes. I guess that just popped into my head because we have used the word conversation so many times, and right now, it's in the there's a great German word for this, the zeitgeist. It's in the zeitgeist right now.
Sure.
That, we're I'm not sure when you're listening to this, but we're taping this about a week before. No, how many weeks until Trump is inaugurated?
Oh God.
The point is, I don't want to get into all that, but the point is, we're in a time right now when the idea of a national conversation, deciding who we are and what we are to each other, is just on our shoulders, every one of us,
all the time,
whether we're paying attention really to politics or not. It's just over us like a blanket right now.
Seriously.
And this all came to mind again because we're using the word conversation, and I'm just thinking out loud. I'm wondering if we could translate any of the wisdom we've sort of discovered together, and that's what any good conversation does. You discover things together. I wonder if that
There's your answer.
I wonder if that can be translated from you and me to a larger sphere.
There's your answer. You already said it.
Well,
there is wisdom.
I wasn't listening. Tell me what I said.
No, there is wisdom inherently in having a meaningful conversation.
Yeah.
Because you're opening yourself up to somebody else's point of view, and when you're actively listening, it creates empathy. And when you can empathize, then you can, this is complete hippie talk right now. You can then start to understand, oh my God, this person is just as human as I am. What this person cares about may not be the same things I care about, but they care about them to the same degree that I care about the things that I do. That maybe sounded like I was running in circles, and I know it sounds like complete hippie talk, but you're right. No. That is how the national conversation happens. When you open yourself up to be vulnerable, to listen to somebody else's point of view, and really meaningfully listen to it, and meaningfully engage in that conversation. And then, that extrapolates, and it spreads like a virus and other people, because it takes practice. It is not a comfortable thing to talk with strangers about controversial topics and meaningfully, right?
Yeah.
But if people do it more often, you start to get a little bit more comfortable with it. It's like a muscle that you have to practice, or that you have to exercise, Yeah. And if more people were willing to engage in conversation with, and it doesn't even have to be strangers. Like, how many people do we know?
Sure.
How many family members? How many friends?
We just came out of the holidays. We've all experienced.
Oh yeah.
The uncle.
Right. Drunk uncle.
In my family, that's me. I'm the crazy uncle in my family. I'm loving everything I'm hearing here, and I'm agreeing with it. I think you articulated it well. Here's a hurdle, I think. It requires both parties kind of agreeing on a set of ground rules coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Or does it? Can one person kind of shape and pull that conversation into something meaningful and
It's hard.
productive?
It's hard because
Seems like it takes two people really on the same page.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think more often than not, yeah. There are people out there who are willing to
Yeah.
do that tango, right?
Yeah.
The two for tango thing. But yeah, if the other person
And everybody's worth it. Everybody's worth a try.
Absolutely.
Have you ever done, you're an actor, have you ever done any improv?
I am not a huge fan of improv just because, again, it's such a huge matzo ball hanging out there. You're so vulnerable to failure and criticism.
Oh, wow.
That, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it because I'm a very self-conscious person. And so that's a hard thing to do for me.
Interesting. You know what? I'll bet I could, if I worked with you as a director for a little bit, I bet I could bring you around. Because just what you've told me about your thoughts on conversation and what you demonstrate in your conversation, I think you'd probably be okay at improv. Because that's really what it is.
Sure.
And I love to talk about it because I just think it's so important. The ground, in fact, it's right there up on my wall. What does that say on the wall?
Yes, and.
Yes, and. That's the fundamental building block of improvisation. When you're doing an improv scene with a partner, whatever your partner says, you accept it.
Right. There's no negating. There's no denial of it because that just shuts the other person down.
If your partner is a forest dolphin swimming through the trees, then that's exactly...
Yes, and there are also sharks that swim through trees from what I understand.
Exactly right. You accept that, and then you add information, and you can't go wrong.
Right.
And then, because people... I've done improv on stage for several years, and people just can't believe it. They think it's just magic. They don't know how it's happening. And it really, you just follow a couple basic rules.
Sure.
And it's there.
I think one of these days I'm going to give it a try. That's for sure. It's just overcoming that vulnerable
But again,
state.
it comes to mind because the yes and attitude in conversation, you accept what you're given. And here it starts to sound a little, schoolyard psychology kind of stuff. But that's all right. You accept what you're given. You add what you have to offer, and then you have the give and take of two. And the reason I thought of this is because of my initial question: do two people have to agree on a couple of rules going in? And that's what improv actors go in. They go in agreeing on a structure,
right?
And you can't just assume that with everybody you talk to.
Right. Yeah, no, that's definitely hard. I think to a large degree, you're absolutely right. You know, if the one person is just completely shut down and they don't want to have, if they're not gonna actually hear anything that the other party has to say, then the whole conversation or the efforts of the other are completely pointless. If the two people don't agree, can the conversation still happen? If it's more than just a, one-time conversation with a stranger at a bar, yes. If one person is willing to put aside their differences with the other person and be patient, then yes. But only because through that demonstration of patience and listening and understanding and accepting, will the other person learn by example that they have to do the same thing. And so the ultimate goal is to get, I guess, the two people to agree on those ground terms, those ground rules. But in just an everyday conversation with a stranger at a bar, if the one person is completely shut down and the other one isn't, then no, that's not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. But going back to the national conversation, and here's where I'm really struggling these days. I don't know the answer to this. I've talked about it on other shows, and that is, where do you draw the line of, being the cool hippie and turn the other cheek and just try to communicate and all of that with someone on the opposite side of the political spectrum? Where do you draw the line between all that I just described and then the idea that, well, they just are really, really wrong and they have to be defeated? That's just all there is to it.
That's hard.
We just have to I'm careful with my metaphors because I'm not talking about actual physical harm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
But those ideas, that way of thinking, just has to be crushed.
Right. We cannot just...
It just has to die.
Yes.
It has no place.
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's really hard because, both of us, I'm sure, have lots of ideas on what those thought processes and ideas that need to be crushed are. And
because I really honestly believe we're in a time like that right now. And I'm going to give you my bona fides here. I was 10 years old when I was delivering that Janesville Gazette.
Okay.
And that's how old I was when I started kind of reading the news and understanding what was going on. And my brother was in Vietnam, and it was the 60s, and even a kid in a small town in Wisconsin, you couldn't escape it.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I bring this up is because I kind of want to defend myself a little bit. I've been paying close attention since I was 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I've been politically active and engaged, and I've never, ever, ever felt anything like this. Even when Ronald Reagan was elected, I thought he was going to be I thought he was just the worst choice possible. But I didn't think he was insane, and I didn't think he was dangerous. I thought he was just wrong about everything, and it was just a plain old right-left political fight.
Right.
This is completely new territory.
That's nuts to hear. Like to hear that from somebody from your generation, because so often, right now I'm hearing at least a lot of likening 2016 and just the 20 teens in general to much of what was going on in the 60s. And to hear from somebody who was alive during the 60s that they've never felt this before, that's crazy to me. Like, this is a turning point in America, in world society.
Oh, my gosh.
This is not just about America. This is literally about the world.
Richard Nixon was a sweetheart compared to this guy. Richard Nixon was a moderate.
Oh,
he was liberal on some issues. Literally.
Yeah.
The world has changed, and the aforementioned Ronald Reagan had a great deal to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Ronald Reagan opened the door, and Donald Trump is just kicking it down.
Man.
So the whole idea of getting along with people and having conversations and making the world a fuzzy-wuzzy place, that's usually where I am. But oh, mercy.
But here's the thing. You're absolutely right. I think if most progressives, I mean, it's pretty obvious to figure out, what our political leanings are at this point. Most Democrats operate by that set of rules, right? And that's good in most situations. But you're right. When at this point in time, when there half of the country that thinks that certain things which are fundamentally on a human level wrong, they're just wrong.
Yeah.
When they
factually wrong.
Yes. It's very difficult to have a meaningful conversation with somebody like that, especially if they're not going to abide by those ground rules and listen. Yeah. That's the biggest thing. And you're right. So what I'm trying to say is I think that Donald Trump is in the president's, or he's our president-elect now because we were too soft.
We meaning
the people on the left.
Okay.
I think in most other circumstances, this idea of empathy is what the world really needs. But, we weren't empathizing with, yes, I know this might be a bit of a...
I know. Okay, go ahead, say it.
Yeah, we weren't empathizing with the Nazis.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Nobody was. And if you were, history has shown what kind of person you were.
Yeah, and there were plenty of people, and again, we can just hear people screaming at us now through their laptop or wherever they're listening. But it's hard not to make this comparison when there are guys literally out in the open on the street with the Heil Hitler salute. I mean, they're coming right out in the open. And certainly there were plenty of people who were saying, "Oh, the Nazis aren't that bad. We're just going to work with them. We'll just, My business is more important, or whatever. It's all a lot of hyperbole that they're really horrible. That we'll get along. Certainly, there were people like that. History shows us. There's no gray area here. It's just very simple to see the history. So,
yikes!
I don't know. I had a really interesting experience just a few days after the election. I got an invitation, a Facebook invitation. Marquette University hosted a little kind of get-together, kind of a seminar, group conversation. And all of the Milwaukee theater people were invited. And the topic was, okay, what do we do now? What do we do?
Survive.
And it was an interesting panel of maybe half a dozen people on the stage, and then an audience in this kind of big lecture hall at Marquette University with lots of people in the theater community. And the opinions varied, some being softer than others. Some were kind of touchy-feely, and others. But one guy especially, I wish I remembered his name. I can't at the moment. But he was a retired professor of theater at Marquette. And he had done a lot of work. He'd spent lots of time overseas and in Eastern Europe and different places. And he was the harshest of all the speakers. He said, I've seen what happens. I've seen firsthand what happens to theater and art and a lot of other things when tyrants take over. And he said, this is what I'm looking at right now. Most people kind of shook their heads. They didn't want to believe him. And I don't know if he's right or not, but I was listening.
I think he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, but I think if you don't value the arts, I understand that people are entitled to, value certain things over another, but culture really is dependent on the arts. Now, it may not be the arts that we're involved with, but conservative culture, liberal culture, American culture, Canadian culture, Mexican culture. What is that culture? It's rooted in the arts. It's rooted in the music. It's rooted in sculptures and jewelry and clothing, and it's all the arts. So when this guy is saying that, a tyrant takes over, those things fall away. Really, we're not just talking about the super progressive, super obnoxious liberal arts in the views of the people at large. We're talking about a culture that is going to fade away as we know it when those types of leaders take over, because it's literally their way or the highway, but highway's death.
I can hear this exact same conversation happening over the last 30 years at a very conservative kitchen table where they're saying these liberal, anything goes, sexual mores, all whatever. Mm-hmm. They're the ones changing our culture. Mm-hmm. So, just what you said could be flipped 180. So I don't want to be in a culture war. That's just weird. But yeah. See, this is really why I have guests come into the studio, because I need you to help me. I'm looking for answers.
Right.
And really just how to proceed right now is very difficult. The word culture is a very kind of malleable word. It can be used in a very negative sense, too, in that, I'm trying to remember the article I read. This writer was making the distinction between art and culture. And the way he defined art, he said that the purpose of art is to challenge and to move and to change the artist and the viewer, or the audience. He said he had a very negative definition of culture. Mm. Culture is the over encompassing sort of force that we kind of have to live in.
Okay.
And in his definition of culture, culture is used to uphold the status quo.
Interesting. I can see that.
So, if you look at our current example, music you hear on Top 40 radio is generally pretty awful.
You're very right. I'm going back, and now I'm going to have to rethink what I said before, because you're making a lot of sense.
The highest rated television shows,
it's garbage.
Dancing with the Stars,
garbage.
Big Bang Theory, which everybody seems to think is real smart and funny. It's really talk about just kind of mind-numbing status
Empty.
quo stuff.
You're right.
Empty, dumb, goofy popcorn stuff that just kind of satiates us. So, well, as we come to some sort of conclusion here, which we gotta, for my sake, if no one else's, we gotta bring this back up. Though it's my fault that this went down into depression. I don't want to leave it there at all. I don't want to leave it there.
No, there's hope. It's really cliche and it's really lame, but like history does repeat itself. It does. And the really horrible things that happen in history that repeat itself, God willing, coming out of those will also repeat itself.
The philosopher Hegel, who was a big influence on Marx and Engels, the dialectic, and that's the conversation, the back and forth. The material world sort of comes upon conflicts, and then we kind of understand those conflicts, and then that's what causes change. So that's sort of the back and forth. And when you say history repeats itself, Hegel would agree, but history repeats itself suggests a circle, a flat circle, where take that flat circle, and then each time it makes a round, it goes up a little bit. So imagine in your mind a slinky that rises up into the sky.
Sure.
So that was Hegel's concept of always progress.
Okay, I like that.
So it is a circle, but it's always progressing. And that was really the fundamental, the key to what held Marx's philosophy up.
Okay.
Was the rising slinky.
Sure.
That's optimistic.
Right.
And I can get down with that. I can live with that. Before we turned on the mics, you and I were talking about how much the world has changed in just 3 generations. You're 24.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 58. My parents are gone, but they would be in their 90s.
Sure.
Oh, my God. We can get optimistic, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can.
Yeah. Because, again, at the risk of sounding cliche, all the real meaningful change happens from, us.
Mm-hmm. It really does.
Us meaning
the people.
Yeah.
The people that are willing to mobilize and put their necks out there and have the uncomfortable conversations. And beyond that, I admire so much the people that go out and protest and do sit-ins and stuff like that. I so badly want to, and then it's like, do I really want to potentially lose my job to skip out on work today to go do this?
Right.
Do I really want,
you make decisions every day.
Right. So I admire those people, and those are the people and us who are just willing to have the conversations, believe it or not, that will lead to change.
And as I often say, it's not an either or proposition. Some people will say, well, you just have to work on yourself. You just have to be filled with love, and then that will change the world. I say, no, that's ridiculous. Yeah, do it. It's great.
It's good for you, right?
It's vital. It's vital for you. It's vital for all of us. Yes,
right.
Do it.
Right.
But that alone isn't going to do it. Now, the other person will say, you got to get angry, and you got to get out in the streets, and you got to sit on the freeway, and you got to... And to him, I say, yes, you're right also. You're both right. It's not an either-or thing. You got to do what you're doing. You got to do what you're doing. Be great if you could, the guy on the street, you should be working on your inside stuff too.
Right.
And you sitting in the lotus position, maybe you should go do your lotus position out on the freeway for a while. I think they ought to get together a little bit. So it's not an either or.
Right. There's a combination, and there are people who are meant for certain tasks in I don't know if you believe in fate or destiny of any sort, but I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and I believe in an ultimate plan, and I think that there are people who are suited for certain tasks, and it is the culmination of everybody doing their specific task, working towards the greater good, that will get that to pass.
Yeah.
You can't make an apple an orange. but they're both fruit. They're both really tasty, and they're both very good for you.
Mm-hmm. And
You
they're
eat 'em-
perfect together
they're
with that
perfect together.
marshmallow sauce.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Everybody's got their part to play, and now more than ever, we have to step out and play those parts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the happy note. There's been a lot of bad stuff that happened in 2016, and it looks like maybe a potentially dark future. But there's people who are willing to have the conversations. There are people who are willing to put their necks out there, and I'm optimistic, believe it or not. As disappointed,
Isn't it ridiculous? I am too.
as disappointed and sad and angry as I am over everything that's about to happen,
I know.
I really do have faith in humanity.
You're crazy.
I know.
And I am too.
We're idiots.
That's my conversation with Andres Garuz. This is Conversations with Charles Bursell. Find us on iTunes, Podcast Source app, iHeartRadio, several platforms. Check out my Facebook page where you can find all links, Charles Bursell, on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else. You know how it works. All right, take care.